All right, so thanks so much to everyone for joining us today for our session on youth and mental health. I am joined by Alani Rouse from Durham, North Carolina. She is a youth advocate leader with the National Juvenile Justice, a youth advocate leader with the National, and also DeVal Ricks from Trenton, New Jersey. He is a youth advocate leader with the New Jersey Youth Caucus here in New Jersey, and Kwamir Hodges, who is also a youth advocate leader with the New Jersey Youth Caucus in New Jersey. So welcome, 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 everybody. One of the things that I'm looking forward to is everyone having the opportunity to hear from these three young adults, because one of the things that I can tell you is that they have a perspective and they have a focus and they have a yearning for reforming this country, not just the states that they live in, but the country in reference to youth justice, or as some people refer to, juvenile justice. And I think that it's critical, as many of you probably are aware of, that in doing that and in the dismantling of the system, that they are able to talk about the intersection of mental health and how it has impacted them, their communities, or their experiences in the youth justice system. So I'm going to turn it over to Alani. I think it would be a great idea, but I want everybody to jump in as they see fit. I would like to hear from you all as far as what are some of the things that folks can do to keep kids out of the youth justice system that have mental health issues. What are some of the things we can do to keep them out?
I always kind of feel up in the air about this question, just because it's a system. So I feel like, yes, there are, I guess, things that you can do to keep kids out, but at the same time, because of the way that the system works, it's not necessarily designed to keep people out. It's designed to bring people in. And so I think that aside from dismantling that, the different systems that are in place, or I guess the system, making sure that there are proper professionals in place to help people and to address all the different marginalized communities within youth. So, you have youth of color, you have Black youth, you have Indigenous youth, you also have queer youth. And so understanding that experience is going to look different for all of them is key, but also understanding that when you're looking at the DSM-5 to diagnose these children, that the DSM-5 is very much research is based in white people, and so you can't use white symptoms to diagnose Black and brown children. It looks different. You also have to keep in mind the way that toxic masculinity may play into the way that some people, or some more masculine people, may kind of exert their emotions. So just making sure that you have people that are well versed in all of these things so that they can identify what things work best. I feel like. So in schools, having the proper amount of social workers, psychologists, and therapists in place, having more community outreach just for children, and places for them to be more safe spaces, I think could make that just easier to handle. Also, the guidelines within schools don't really make for a lot of wiggle room in terms of having these issues. And so I also don't think that people that are with kids all day understand what they're looking at and haven't been really taught how to de-escalate or how to handle those things outside of referring to discipline and pushing kids out.
Those are all great points. Totally in agreement with that. And so I wanted to see also, Kwamir, how would you answer that question?
You get me?
Uh-huh.
Can you just reiterate the question one more time, Kathy? Sorry.
Oh, so what, if thinking about keeping kids that have mental health issues or emotional and behavioral challenges, when we think about keeping them out of the juvenile justice system, what do you think are some of the things that we can do?
I think I agree with some of what Alani had said. More community outreach, more after school programs and
Mhm.
school resources and things of that nature to help the situation before it becomes a more developed situation. Try to attack the situation at home first, where a lot of the issues happen for Black and brown kids at home, whether it's through struggles of poverty or abuse or whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
Parents might be going through something and stuff like that. So just
Mhm.
having the place to get away from that. So like better community outreach and stuff like that. Then definitely more help within inside the schools as
Mhm.
far as with better programming or someone you could just talk to, like a real guidance counselor, or
Mhm.
someone like that that actually cares and communicate with the kid or understand what it is that that individual is going through.
Mhm. Those are good points. Absolutely agree with. Yes, you're absolutely right. It's almost like what I hear from both of you is that it really does take like a village, right?
Yeah.
When we're talking about keeping them out of the system. What about you, DeVal? What do you think?
I agree with both Alani and Kwame. The the first step is teaching people how to identify mental health illness behaviors or emotional behaviors, like
Mhm.
where kids are acting out due to a lack of understanding of how to properly express themselves.
Mhm.
A lot of people are quick to write it off like, oh, they're acting the way that they're acting because of X, Y, Z. When a lot of times, especially at younger ages, they might not even be fully aware of how they're like why they're acting the way that they are.
Mhm.
So the most important thing is how they both stated community outreach. Yeah, like you can't expect everybody to be able to identify people if they themselves don't know what they're looking for.
Mhm.
So like
Mhm.
even if like we don't even have to create new community programs, which there ain't too many of them now,
Right.
but we could just instill that in the systems that we do have. So like the one thing I like the most that you said was that the system isn't like it's a system that's designed to bring people in. Like a lot of the laws that we have are reactionary to actions that come from emotional unbalanced children, like how Kamir said, whether it's from stuff that's going on at home or stuff that's going on in their community.
Mhm.
So
No, those are all good points. They really are. It's um it's interesting. Oops. I think that I think that a lot of times the folks that are in the system that are supposed to be there to bring about a certain type of change, I think a lot of times there's not as much cultivation, right? There's not as much change within that. Like you guys were saying, sometimes the professionals, well, I've heard all of you say the professionals may have to change. So instead of looking for issues that are going on with kids in this particular arena, they might like you guys referenced, they might have to look at the issue of poverty. They might have to look at what's going on in their home, you know. One of the things I always think about is um, and I'm sure you guys remember much better than I am, is the kid who comes into class late, you know, and he's always late, and you know, he comes in, everybody's already seated, they have their books out, and he comes in at the teacher's already talking, and the first thing the teacher does is turn to him and chastise him, like, oh my gosh, you're always late, you know, this is getting to be a problem, go to the principal's office. Whereas we don't realize sometimes that's the great opportunity right there that we miss because we're chastising when we should be asking what's going on. What's going on that you come into school every day late, but instead we berate them, you know, we embarrass them in front of their peers. So I totally agree with what you guys said. I thought was phenomenal. Another question I'd like for you guys to talk about, and then I want you to just talk about anything, actually anything that you think is pertinent, is when kids do get involved in the justice system, and those kids that have a mental health challenge, what does that look like in the justice system during incarceration?
I could go first on that. Like I struggle with a lot of mental health issues, like as far as like depression, bipolar, like paranoid, just like crazy things. And yeah, I in the 8.5 years that I was incarcerated, I was transferred between 13 plus different facilities.
Mm-hmm.
Like from my behaviors coming out of my room, like I was very, very quick to conflict. Like if I didn't have nothing to do that day, I would find a way to start a fight with somebody.
Mm-hmm.
If I ain't get a visit that week, I wouldn't care about being on lockdown and getting a visit next week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it took me a long time to be able to understand why I was going through the emotions that I was going through. But once I was able to understand and comprehend my own emotions where I was self-aware,
Mm-hmm.
I started to notice a lot of the same behaviors and patterns in a lot of the people around me. And then with the people that I got close to, the ones that I considered to be friends after a while, like once I got to know them and I seen the same behaviors in them, I started to find out that we suffer from a lot of similarities. So like with violence, especially in the like once you're in the system, is a lot of the way that the justice system works, it encourages violence more than good behavior. You know, especially if you got certain type of sentences from the judge for whatever charge you got, you don't get no type of reward for good behavior. You don't get to come out early. You don't get to go to a minimum security facility or whatever. Like, but the only time you do get guaranteed attention is when you act out.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So that's interesting. So it's almost like you're only rewarded when you break the rules.
When my experience, the higher the security level that you have, like the more the secure the facility is, it's actually better than a lot of lower level security. Like once you get around low level security inmates or prisoners or however you want to refer to certain types of people,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot more drama because with that lower level security comes the fear of, like once you get used to certain type of customs that you have and privileges, comes the fear of losing that. A lot of people take advantage of that, and like you have to be willing to accept disrespect. You have to be willing to accept officers taking advantage of their job and just making your time harder. Whereas when you're on a maximum gang tier where the the closest person that's going home is 20, 30 years away, people are a lot more mindful about the things that they do and the things that they say.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, depending on how you do your time, it's a lot. Like you get rewarded for being bad and you being good.
Mm-hmm.
It's strange. A lot of people that has never been in the system might not understand that way of thinking or that logic, but the ones who do, they understand.
Can I jump in real quick, Kathy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like I said, I agree with everything that I just said. It's like I used to tell you, it's like once you get to that level of constantly getting in trouble and be considered that guy, and it's like you get the more respect. They get used to seeing you in solitary all the time, so they know you don't care. They can't hold something over your head. They can't hold on, like when you get your commissary or when you're going out to record something like that. They got no leverage at that point, and they feel like you don't care, whatever like that. And like you said, the higher the security, the less people, you don't have nothing to lose. Like I said, next person go home 20, 30 years or whatever like that. So it's like you can't tell him he's not going out the wreck today or he's gonna be locked in the room for 5 hours. Because stuff like that, he don't care. So it almost makes you want to get to that point. And it's like backwards, like you said, if you haven't been incarcerated or not really like, involved in the system, you wouldn't understand why. But it's like that. And it's, like you said, trying to identify someone with mental health that's incarcerated is really no way. Because the ones with mental health and dealing with mental health issues are considered, they're degraded, considered slow or special or something like that. They're not looked at as, having mental health. Like, they're the ones who get picked on by the guards or other inmates and stuff like that, and taken advantage of and stuff like that. They don't get the help that they need, whether it's from, like I said, security, personnel, even the professionals, the site who's supposed to be there to help them. The sites get tired of coming down to talk to them and lock up or trying to figure out what's wrong with them or come and try to visit them or, whatever the case may be, because they just there for a check, whatever like that. They're not there to actually focus on the help that we need or whatever like that. So it's the greatest. So like people that is.
And so, you know what, Alani, I was thinking about, like, kind of springboarding off of what Kwame and Deval said. So even, what do you think about, like, even in just the process of, let's say, just being arrested? Do you think that if you're struggling with, any type of mental health disability, does that affect that process as well?
I mean, I guess I would imagine so. Like, that's not something I've experienced, so, like, I can't speak to that. But I mean, I guess so. Like the whole process, you're going to be arrested and the deprivation, the all of that. I think that either you can, it can do that to you, but also if you do it enough, you can kind of get used to it. And so you can I would think that even with that process, you get used to it and you kind of adapt in a survival mode type of way to it. Now, this is not to say that you don't still have certain things going on, but I think yes, that can affect you. But after a while, if that's something that you get used to experiencing, you have a way that you have learned to process that whole thing.
Gotcha. Well, you know what, Alani, why don't you share a little bit about your experience?
About my experience, I wasn't incarcerated. I was pushed out of school, but my push out will push me into the hospital all the time.
Gotcha.
So, you go, you do your squat and cough. They pass you down. They take all your stuff. And so, but after a while, when I would the process, honestly, that whole process did not bother me as much as understanding that me going home was contingent on how much progress they thought I made. Right. And so, right. I don't know. I always adapted to the process very well because I understood that all right, if I chill out here for this amount of time, they'll leave me be. But I also got to a point where I was all right, this my 4th time in here. They will keep me in here if I don't do this a certain way. So it did do things in a way. It really did not help the way that people like to make it seem. And even when people talk about mental health, I think that they don't understand that even the whole hospitalization and the psychological and all that stuff, even the mental health system in itself is very harmful. It's harmful. And it's it's harmful, it's ableist, and it's still whitewashed in itself. And so, but I can imagine going through that was a mess.
Because even Alani, when you talk about that, there are a lot of similarities between that type of, I'm going to just use this word, between that type of oppression and that type of, I want to find the right word for that. There are a lot of similarities between that and being held in the confines or going through the process of being arrested and institutionalized and incarcerated. Because
a lot of times when they first do it, most of the time when they process you, it's not even a regular person processing you. Most of the time you get processed like a sheriff processes you.
Right.
So they process you, they handcuff you, like they do all that. So that's usually how that process works. And it's like, it's not supposed to be like that, but that's what happens a lot. Particularly with minors, like it's not supposed to happen, but like that's what they do.
Yeah, because
I've heard,
go ahead.
but I've met other people that that's been through the mental health system, not the prison system. And I've heard people state that before, that in some cases, especially like if you really do have a mental health issue, going through the mental health, like the hospitals, like how she said, the intake process and all that is actually more damaging than going through the prison system, because they look at it like they justify everything they do with you could be a danger to yourself or others. So they completely take away every right that you have. You have no say so in yourself until someone else determines you're fit to make a decision for yourself. And I've heard people say that before, that it's actually more harmful than the way that the prison system is.
It's a hard system to get out of, and especially like it'll be like really small stuff. Like they'll be like, oh, you're not doing this, so you don't want to go home. So like I remember, I don't eat Jello. Like that's, some people think that's weird, but I don't eat Jello. I don't like Jello. And so if I didn't, but like when they're giving you your food, they're like, all right, like you need to eat all your food. But I was like, I don't eat Jello. I'm not gonna eat this Jello. And so they'll go on your chart and they'll be like, all right, like lack of compliance, etc. Like you get a certain number of points for like a day, and you have to get this number of points. You got your levels, like you got a bunch of stuff. And so they'll be like, so like I see like you're not complying when it's time to eat dinner. You're not eating dinner. And so then like if you don't eat all of your dinner, they're like, oh, so like are you starving yourself? Are you veering towards eating disorder? Like it's always something. Or, you know, if one marker goes missing, now they have to strip search everybody, and they're gonna flip your room upside down.
Because of the one marker. Right.
Yeah, like my roommate, like she hit a marker one time and they like strip searched us, and I was like, are you serious? But because everything is a danger to you or others. So
yeah, good point. Good points. Good points. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that anyone else wants to share. I've pretty much asked all of the questions. I thought what you guys shared was very insightful, because I know people don't usually think that through. They don't, a lot of them, they don't have that experience, and they don't even know that a lot of that is the process for young people, young adults, you know, adolescents, and they don't understand really what the impact of that is and how lasting that can be, regardless of what system you're in, you know, at that particular time. And so even when you think about if you're in a, let's say, a crisis unit at a hospital, or you're incarcerated in a juvenile facility, and you're still involved in going to school, what does that look like? So for some kids, we've heard, well, school while I'm incarcerated is a ditto underneath my door. That's school. And in the same way, like sometimes I've heard on a crisis unit, it might not be a ditto underneath the door, but school is, I'm in a group with like 4 or 5 people. Everybody's on a different level. We're not all doing the same thing. And so already my schooling is interrupted and I'm totally lost. So
school is weird. School is like an hour a day, maybe, sort of, but you don't have a teacher. Like everybody has one teacher, but you could have, like I remember one time I had like a 6-year-old on my unit. So you got 6-year-olds and you got like 18-year-olds and you got one teacher. So essentially school is thrown out the window. And you get back to it when you get back to it, if you get back to it in a timely fashion, but school doesn't exist.
And
I repeated a couple of classes.
Gotcha.
in my opinion, that's just more so that they can say they're meeting certain standards to either get funding or just to be able to stay open.
Right. Yeah, because I think a lot of people don't understand. Um, I'm not sure about the crisis unit, but when anybody goes into a facility, rather like a juvenile justice facility, and if you've had a diagnosis prior to being incarcerated, um, that diagnosis follows you right into that facility. And if you in fact have an IEP or a 504 and you're part of special education, the facility has to provide those services to you by law, and they're paid by the sending school district. So when people say, oh, well, we don't get paid, no, you do. The actual facility gets paid by the sending school district in order to educate you. And that's typically where the work should come from. Um, so I know, like when my son was arrested, I actually, because I wanted them to get the process going as quick as possible, and so I brought a lot of his information there to the facility, to the facility that he was in, to help them get the process going. Because otherwise, sometimes you just sit there. You'll sit for weeks, and if they don't have work for you to do, you might not necessarily do anything that's going to sort of uh, continue on with where you're at academically. So,
Does that apply for private institutions or just public?
and whatever school district you're in, they are responsible if you go into if you're incarcerated. They are legally responsible for you when it comes to your schooling, and they are, yes, they are financially responsible for making that happen. If you're part of well, regardless of whether you're part of special education or not, because those taxes are not diverted, right? You figure, because schooling comes from like local taxes
Yeah.
that people in the community pay. So yes, they are. So whether it's private or not, if it depends on where you live. If you, let's say, if you live in Durham, but you're going to a private school in Roxborough, Durham, which is where you live, Durham School District is responsible for paying for that if you are in a facility or you become incarcerated. Yeah. So the onus is on them to make sure you have appropriate services and supports. That's one of the things where the system breaks down with kids that have challenges. And the thing that's interesting, because even when we talk about the term, like a lot of times we struggle with it because it has such a negative connotation. People don't want to say mental health, you have a mental health challenge. If you're feeling depressed, okay. So I think sometimes we have to do a better job of not making people feel a certain kind of way because they have a mental health challenge like depression. It's I think the way in which we look at some of that, I think we could do a better job of not making people feel some kind of way. And I think that's the reason why certain cultures, they don't want to talk about that. You tell them, oh, my son suffers from depression, they don't want to talk about that. Or my son has ADHD, they don't, oh, no, nothing's wrong with him, he's just bad, right? And then what happens is, where do we get 6 years later? He's bad where? In a juvenile facility. And that's the reason why 80% of the kids that are in juvenile facilities have a mental health challenge. Whereas, like you guys were saying, if we just treat it early.
But a lot of people, especially, I can only speak with my experience, like especially like with the black community, it's like taboo to actually acknowledge the fact that my son might be suffering or my daughter might be suffering from X,
Exactly.
Y, Z, because that's a white people's thing. Like, and that's that's one of the major issues, because they gotta understand, like, if you sit there and like when you start noticing the signs at an earlier age, 5, 6, 7, 8, by time, like how you just said, by time you start to realize, oh wait, maybe he really does have X, Y, Z wrong with him. He's already in the justice system. He's
Mm-hmm.
already labeled a criminal, or he's already labeled a threat to him or herself.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely have to actually acknowledge the fact that it's not a white people thing. It's not an Asian thing. Like it's just a thing. Period. Like
Mm-hmm.
race has to be taken off of mental health issues. Period. Unless you're looking at the third, like the specific, how can you say it? Like the specific circumstances of that person.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking at it on a more deeper level and looking at it like, okay, like this type of mental illness is hereditary or genetic, then you can look at it in terms of race. But as far as treatment, it don't matter if you're black, white, from wherever. Like everybody suffers from mental illnesses on varying levels. Some might actually be going through a phase. It might be affecting somebody on a deeper level to where they need medication. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think all that's valid. I also think that the implicit biases that people have about what things are supposed to look like in different races or what they name them is also equally as important. Especially when I've worked with kids, because I have like a whole group of kids. I work with, they're 7 and 8, but making sure that I myself um am consistent with the way that I name behaviors in my children, whether it be on the basis of gender or race, is important, because we are conditioned to see certain things a certain way depending on like what gender or like what race a child is. So, certain things like, like she, a girl being expressive, like that's her thing, but a little boy doing it's like, like he's doing a lot. And so making sure that people, educators, just everybody are aware of their biases and the way that they categorize things. But also oftentimes I'll see a lot of little black boys misdiagnosed. Like they're always trying to diagnose them with ADHD or ADD. And sometimes it's appropriate, but sometimes it's not. And so if you tell this little boy that, oh, you got ADHD, that's why you're like that, and you've been hyping him up on all these meds that he doesn't need, I think that that's also equally as important to make sure that people are being diagnosed correctly.
Very good points. Very, very good points. I'm so looking forward to when we get together again and we can talk about how race impacts communities of colors, particularly those youth and adolescents, right? How racism affects them and how that manifests itself in a mental health disability. So I'm looking forward to you guys. I think, yeah, I think you guys got it. We
I
definitely.
got one more thing to say before we end.
Mm-hmm.
It's what Alani just said. One thing people have to understand, everybody's so quick to throw medication at it, thinking that's just going to solve everything. Not in all cases, medication is needed. And in some cases, medication is actually worse. Like when I first finally actually started accepting, like, all right, I'm going to talk to somebody and try to figure this out. That's what they did to me. They started throwing all types of medication at me. And then it was actually an officer one time who like sat me, like we were sitting there talking, and he started breaking down like the justice system to me. And then I took the time, like I started refusing my medications for a couple of days. And then I thought that they were going to come, like, because anytime in that situation, you start refusing your medication, they coming and taking you because you might be a threat to yourself or the other. But there's one CO never let them take me off of the unit. Like at this time, we were already over there for about like 18 months. So like it was one of them type of environments where respect was a mandatory, regardless if you're an officer or inmate. Like it was that type of environment. So he started bringing me in paperwork about the medications that they had me on, and the medications that they had me on were used for people who had seizures. It slows down the part of the brain where the seizures most commonly occur.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's why people walk around with like zombies. It also affects short-term memory loss.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and this is the type of medication they had me on just because I was acting out. So like once I stopped taking that, like my brain, I started to be able to think more clearly. I learned real. The first thing I learned was that I didn't need medication to control myself. I learned how to control myself just from being calm.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another big issue is that people are so quick to throw medication and they believe that, oh well, with the medical advances that we have, medication can fix anything. But what people got to realize, 5, 10 years down the line, we also learn medication also comes with a lot of side effects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
Points.
it
that's
does.
anybody listening that might have a kid that they think is suffering from it. If the first thing they offer you is medication, don't. Medication isn't always the answer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my mom, what is it? She was like a bio major, but she works with like medicines and all types of stuff. And because she understands, like, one, she understands the stuff that's in the medications that they're, putting on the market, but she also knows about the process, I guess, to have them made and stuff. And so I didn't start taking medicine until I was like 17. She really wasn't crazy about vaccinations and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but she was like, I understand what's in those things. She's like, but also a lot of these things that they're offering to you, there's probably like a more natural way for like you to get those same effects. And just because it's going to take you more time to do it doesn't mean that like it can't happen. And I'm really like not a fan of medication, but also I see that a lot of people feel like the only way that you can like do better or function is on medication, which isn't true. And it's like a lot of the things that you may need medication for, like I have like a PTSD medication. It's like that's fine and it's cool, but it's also a blood pressure medication. So like abruptly stopping it can be dangerous.
Right. Right.
Or like not knowing how to do certain things without it like can be dangerous because like what
Right.
happens if I don't have a medication? So medication's nice-ish, I guess, if it really does help you do some parts of your daily life in a way that you couldn't before. But I think that offering more like natural options or different options is important rather than being like, all right, here are these meds.
Mm-hmm.
Because meds don't help you like learn how to interact with people and learn how to handle situations at all.
Yeah, it doesn't.
It's like, okay, you gave me these meds, now what?
Yeah, it took me a long time to be able to readjust how to have a civil conversation that didn't have to lead to a fight or didn't have to lead to one of us got to get stabbed.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Anybody have any last minute comments?
I'm about to take a screenshot of the screen just so you guys know.
A screenshot. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Everybody's good?
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you so much for participating in this session. I think that it's going to be an amazing thing for people attending the conference this year, the forum, to be able to pull this up and listen to all of your recommendations and your experiences. I think it's very educational for people. I think it's very important that you guys keep doing that because it is your voices that need to be in the process of reform. Okay, don't forget that. Don't devalue your experiences, right? Keep speaking, righty? So thank you. I'm gonna clap for you guys. Thank you so much.